I'd like to start out each podcast with an inspiring quote. It could be taken anywhere from our Lord himself to Bertrand Russell, but all of these quotes, if you adhere to them, will lead you to live in a more saintly and hence a more manly way. Because for men, being saintly is being manly. With all of these quotes, I'm not going to tell you the name of the person quoted till the end, because then people think less about the person I'm quoting and more about the quote itself. So here goes the first one. I thought it grossly erroneous to consider culture as a mere resultant from the number of books one has read. Reading is advantageous not so much as a function of the quantity, but rather the quality of the books one has read, and mainly in function of the quality of the reader and in the way in which he reads. I sustain that a very well-read and knowledgeable person, that is, well-informed about many facts or notions of scientific, historic, or artistic interest, can be far less cultured than another with a smaller trove of information. And for this reason, one who has read little but assimilated much is more cultured than one who has read a lot but assimilated little. Reflection is the first means to carry out this positive action. More than a living repository of facts and dates, names and texts, a cultured man should be a thinker, and a thinker's main book is the reality he has before his eyes. He himself is his most consulted author, and other authors and books are precious, but clearly subsidiary elements. Mere reflection, however, is not enough. Man is not pure spirit. Through an affinity which is not only conventional, there is a nexus between the higher realities he considers with his intellect and the colors, sounds, and shapes and perfumes he grasps through his senses. Cultural effort is complete only when man imbibes his whole being with the values that his intellect has considered. And that was by the great Brazilian Catholic thinker Plinio Correia de Oliveira. And I think it's really true because today people have all the books they could ever wish for on Amazon, but people are less cultured because they don't have an interior life. They don't reflect. So I hope you enjoyed that quote. And now, the dream for today. Reading the 40 Dreams of St. John Bosco. 12. A Fiendish Elephant. From the very beginning of the oratory, Don Bosco had started the custom of giving a spiritual strenna, or New Year's gift, to his boys and co-workers on the last day of the year. It took the form of a motto or slogan to be practiced in the year then about to dawn. This custom is still kept by Don Bosco's successors. On Tuesday, January 6th, 1863, after the night prayers, as all artisans and students eagerly awaited him, Don Bosco mounted the platform and addressed them. Tonight, I should give you this strenna. Every year around Christmas, I regularly beg God to suggest a strenna that may benefit you all. In view of your increased number, I doubled my prayers this year. The last day of the year, Wednesday, came and went, and so did Thursday and Friday, but nothing came to me. On Friday night, January 2nd, I went to bed exhausted, but could not fall asleep. The next morning, I arose from bed worn out and almost half dead, but I didn't feel upset over it. Rather, I was elated, knowing from past experience that a very bad night is usually a forewarning that our Lord is about to reveal something to me. That day I went on with my work at Borgo Cornelese. The next day, by early evening, I arrived back here. After hearing confessions, I went to bed, tired from my work at Borgo and from not sleeping the night before. I soon dozed off. Now began the dream which will give you your strenna. My dear boys, I dreamed that it was a feast day afternoon, and that you were all busy playing while I was in my room with Professor Thomas Villari discussing literature and religion. Suddenly there was a knock at my door. I rose quickly and opened it. My mother, dead now for 6 years, was standing there. Breathlessly she gasped, "Come and see! Come and see!" "What happened?" I asked. "Come, come," she replied. I dashed to the balcony. Down in the playground, surrounded by a crowd of boys, stood an enormous elephant. "How did this happen?" I exclaimed. "Let's go down." Professor Villari and I looked at each other in surprise and alarm, and then raced downstairs. As was only natural, many of you had run to the elephant. It seemed meek and tame. Playfully it lumbered about, nuzzling the boys with its trunk and cleverly obeying their orders, as though it had been born and raised in the oratory. Very many of you kept following it about and petting it, but not all. In fact, most of you were scared and fled from it to safety. Finally, you hid in the church, and I too tried to get in through the side door which opens into the playground. But as I passed Our Lady's statue beside the drinking fountain and touched the hem of her mantle for protection, she raised her right arm. Valari did likewise on the other side of the statue, and the Virgin raised her left arm. I was amazed, not knowing what to think of such an extraordinary thing. When the bell rang for the church service, you all trooped in. I followed and saw the elephant standing at the rear by the main entrance. After Vespers and the sermon, I went to the altar, assisted by Father Alsonati and Father Savio to give benediction. At the solemn moment when you all deeply bowed to adore the Blessed Sacrament, the elephant, still standing at the end of the middle aisle, knelt down too, but with its back to the altar. Once services were over, I tried to dash out to the playground and see what would happen, but I was detained by someone. A while later, I went out through the side door which opens into the porticos and saw you at your usual games. The elephant too had come out of the church, and had idled over to the second playground where the new wing is under construction. At that moment, at the far end of the playground, I saw a banner followed processionally by boys. It bore in huge letters the inscription, Sancta Maria, succurre miseris, Holy Mary, help your forlorn children. To everybody's surprise, that monstrous beast, once so tame, suddenly ran amok. Trumpeting furiously, it lunged forward, seized the nearest boys with its trunk, hurled them into the air or flung them to the ground, and then trampled them underfoot. Though horribly mauled, the victims were still alive. Everybody ran for dear life. Screams and shouts and pleas for help rose from the wounded. Worse, would you believe it? Some boys who were spared by the elephant, rather than aid their wounded companions, joined the monstrous brute to find new victims. As all this was happening, I was standing by the second arch of the portico near the drinking fountain. The little statue that you see there, the statue of the Blessed Virgin, became alive and grew to life-size. Then, as Our Lady raised her arms, her mantle spread open to display magnificently embroidered inscriptions. Unbelievably, it stretched far and wide to shelter all those who gathered beneath it. The best boys were the first to run to it for safety. Seeing that many were in no hurry to run to her, Our Lady called aloud, Venite ad me omnes, come all to me. Her call was heeded, and as the crowd of boys under the mantle increased, so did the mantle spread wider. However, a few youngsters kept running about, and were wounded before they could reach safety. Flushed and breathless, the Blessed Virgin continued to plead, but fewer and fewer were the boys who ran to her. The elephant, meanwhile, continued its slaughter, aided by several lads who dashed about, wielding one sword or two, and preventing their companions from running to Mary. The elephant never even touched these helpers. Meanwhile, prompted by the Blessed Virgin, some boys left the safety of her mantle in quick sorties to rescue some victims. No sooner did the wounded get beneath Our Lady's mantle than they were instantly cured. Again and again several of those brave boys, armed with cudgels, went out and, risking their lives, shielded the victims from the elephant until nearly all were rescued. The playground was now deserted, except for a few youngsters lying about almost dead. At one end, by the portico, a crowd of boys stood safe under the Virgin's mantle. At the other stood the elephant, with some 10 or 12 lads who had helped it wreak such havoc, and who still insolently brandished swords. Suddenly rearing up on its hind legs, the elephant changed into a horrible long-horned spectre and cast a black net over its wretched accomplices. Then, as the beast roared, a thick cloud of smoke enveloped them, and the earth suddenly gaped beneath them and swallowed them up. I looked for my mother and Professor Valari to speak to them, but I could not spot them anywhere. Then I turned to look at the inscriptions on Mary's mantle and noticed that several were actual quotations or adaptations of scriptural texts. I read a few of them. Qui elucidant me vitam aeternam habebunt. They that explain me shall have life everlasting. Ecclesiasticus. Qui me inveniet vitam. He who finds me finds life. Proverbs. Si quis est pravalus veniat ad me. Whoever is a little one, let him come to me. Proverbs. Refugium peccatorum, refuge of sinners. Salus credentium, salvation of believers. Plena omnes pietatis, mansuetudinis et misericordiae. Full of piety, meekness, and mercy. Beati qui custodiant vias meas. Blessed are they that keep my ways. After a brief silence, the Virgin, seemingly exhausted by so much pleading, soothingly comforted and heartened the boys. You heeded my call, and were spared the slaughter wrought by the devil and your companions. Do you want to know what caused their ruin? Sunt colloquia prava, foul talk and foul deeds. You also saw your companions wielding swords. They are those who seek your eternal damnation by enticing you from me, just as they did with some schoolmates of yours. But quos Deus ditius expeciat, durius damnat. Those for whom God keeps waiting, he punishes more severely. The infernal demon enmeshed and dragged them to eternal perdition. Now go in peace, but remember my words. Flee from companions who befriend Satan. Avoid foul conversation. Have boundless trust in me. My mantle will always be your safe refuge. Our Lady then vanished. Only her beloved statuette remained. My deceased mother reappeared. Again the banner with the inscription, Sancta Maria Succure Miseris, was unfurled. Marching processionally behind, the boys sang Laudate Maria, O lingue fideli. Praise Mary, O ye faithful tongues. Shortly afterwards, the singing waned, and the whole scene faded away. I awoke in a sweat. Such was my dream. My sons, now it is up to you to draw your own strenna. Examine your conscience. You will know if you were safe under Mary's mantle, or if the elephant flung you into the air, or if you were wielding a sword. I can only repeat what the Virgin said, Venite ad me omnes, come all to me. Turn to her, call on her in any danger. I can assure you that your prayers will be heard. Those who were so badly mauled by the elephant are to learn to avoid foul talk and bad companions. Those who strive to entice their companions from Mary must either change their ways or leave the house immediately. If anyone wants to know the role he played, let him come to my room, and I will tell him. But I repeat, Satan's accomplices must either mend their ways or go. Good night. Don Bosco had spoken with such fervor and emotion that for a whole week afterwards the boys kept discussing that dream and would not leave him in peace. Every morning they crowded his confessional. Every afternoon they pestered him to find out what part they had played in the mysterious dream. But there is more. On this occasion he made a list of the wounded and of those who wielded one or two swords. He gave it to Celestine Dorando, instructing him to watch over them. The cleric handed the list over to us, and it is still in our possession. The wounded were 13, probably those who had not been rescued and sheltered beneath Our Lady's mantle. 17 lads wielded one sword, only 3 had 2. Scattered marginal notes next to a boy's name indicate an amendment of life. Also, we must bear in mind that the dream, as we shall see, referred also to the future. That it mirrored the true state of things was admitted by the boys themselves. I had no idea that Don Bosco knew me so well, one of them stated. He revealed my spiritual condition and my temptations so exactly that I could find nothing to add. 2 other boys were told that they were wielding swords. It's quite true, each admitted. I knew it all along. They mended their ways. One afternoon, while talking of this dream and remarking that some boys had already left the oratory, and others would soon follow, lest they harm their companions, Don Bosco came to mention his own wizardry, as he called it. In this connection he told the following incident. Some time ago, a boy wrote home and falsely accused priests and superiors of the house of grave wrongdoings. Fearing that Don Bosco might see the letter, he held on to it till he could secretly mail it. That same day, right after dinner, I sent for him. In my room I told him of his misdeed, and asked why he had told such lies. Brazenly he denied everything. I let him talk, and then, word for word, I repeated the contents of the letter to him. Embarrassed and frightened, he knelt at my feet in tears. "Was my letter intercepted?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Your family has probably received it by now, and it's up to you to put matters right." The boys around him asked how he had found that out. "Oh, it's my wizardry," he answered with a laugh. This wizardry and his dream, which revealed not only the boys' present spiritual condition, but their future as well, must have been one and the same thing. The end of The Fiendish Elephant. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed.